Okay, everyone is trickling in nicely. Hello, everyone. We are very excited to welcome you all to this special session of Indelible's second annual Festival of Literature. We want to thank you all for being here tonight or this afternoon or this morning. I mean, so many of you are joining us from so many different places from around the globe. We're very happy to have you join this very interesting session planned for today, and we hope that you would find this to be an indelible experience. So among the list of international writers, poets, playwrights, screenwriters, and other literary figures lined up for the festival this year, today's event will zero in on two popular literary genres, screenwriting and novel writing. So, and many of you here tonight, from fans to aficionados to scholars of TV, have probably, and TV and novels, have probably read Raymond Khoury's The Last Templar, The Sanctuary, The Sign, probably his latest novel, The Empire of Lies, or you've watched the BBC series Spooks and The Waking Dead. Those of you with a liking for narratives in cinema, as well as music videos, have probably seen Sophie Boutros's award-winning movie, Mahbas, and her many elegant video clips. So before we start, we'd like to give special thanks and acknowledgement again to our festival sponsors for this year, the American University in Dubai, of course, Università Gabriele D'Annunzio in Italy, EBSCO Host Information Services, Montessori Academy Australia, Pedagogy and Beyond Dubai, Salmon Poetry, and the International Association for Jungian Studies. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Rula Maria, the editor of Indelible. I may have accepted some of your submissions, and sorry if I've rejected others as well, but I'm the person who does all that. And my co-host today is award-winning poet and playwright Adam Wyeth, who is joining us from Ireland. Just a moment before we introduce our speakers, I'd like to take a few seconds for a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, please make sure that your mics are muted during the talk in order to avoid any interfering background noise. And as for the Q&A session after the talk, you may either type your questions into the chat box, or alternatively, if you prefer, you may use the raise hand function by clicking on the participant button available, and then we will invite you to unmute your mic in order to ask your question. So finally, without further ado, and it is with the great delight that I would like to welcome tonight's featured guests, Raymond Khoury and Sophie Boutros. And I will hand it over now to Adam for the rest of the intros.
Thanks, Rula Maria. Lovely to be here and to introduce, to be at this special event and introduce these two extraordinary writers, Raymond Khoury and Sophie Boutros, both from Lebanon originally. Raymond Khoury was born in Beirut and has been based in London since the 80s, and is, of course, a screenwriter and novelist, best known perhaps as the author of the 2006 New York Times bestseller, The Last Templar. Upon his graduation as an architect, Khoury returned to London, working in investment banking. It was through this unlikely career path that Khoury became interested in writing, as Khoury was introduced to a Wall Street investment banker who developed screenplays in his spare time. Taking an idea of his that the two jointly developed, Khoury wrote a screenplay which was a finalist for a Fulbright Fellowship in Screenwriting. His second writing attempt, an autobiographical account of his college years in war-torn Lebanon, was also shortlisted for the same award. In 1996, Khoury optioned the rights to the Melvyn Bragg novel, The Maid of Buttermere, and wrote the screenplay adaptation of it. Robert De Niro soon announced to Variety that he would be producing the movie and playing the lead role. Khoury has also written for the BBC shows Spooked, known as MI5 in the United States, and Waking Dead. I can just hear a bit of background noise, just to remind everyone, if you could put yourself on mute, that would be great. And also delighted to welcome Sophie Boutros. In 2003, Sophie started her career as a music video director with Julia Boutros' hit, I'm not sure how to say this, Le Bahr Mach. And for 9 years, she directed A-list Arab singers like Rashid El Mahid, Nancy Aram, Abdul Majid Abdallah, Nawal Khoury, among others. Sophie has directed several TV shows in Future TV, Lebanon and Dubai TV, and UAE. She's also directed promotional videos and TV ads for high-end brands. In 2013, Sophie started a new project, co-writing and directing her first feature film, Mabas. This award-winning film was produced in 2015 and premiered at the Dubai International Film Festival 2016 and was later released in Lebanon, Syria, UAE, Jordan, Palestine, Kuwait, and Sweden in 2017. Making waves of success, Mabas was watched by more than 130,000 viewers and toured the world in festivals. Sophie had a major role in creating the Mohammed bin Rashid School for Communication at AUD, where she has been working for 11 years. She enjoys movies, traveling, and being around family and friends. So Raymond and Sophie, you're very welcome to Indelible. The floor is yours. I think perhaps Rula is going to kick off with a question. Is that right?
Yes, I would like to invite Raymond and Sophie to speak a little bit about their work. So Raymond, perhaps we will start with you since you write in both genres, the novel and the screen.
Sure. Well, I came to writing, as you mentioned, Adam, kind of by accident, intending to be a director. But then writing took off on its own and it became a career, and it was kind of hard to let go, and it was too enjoyable as well to kind of think of parking it while pursuing directing. And then that went from screenwriting into novels also accidentally. They're very long stories, which I won't bore you with here, but I guess what I've been doing for the last 15 years or so is writing novels. I put screenwriting aside to focus on the books. I had 8 books published, starting with The Last Templar. And previous to that, as you said, I worked I started my writing career as a screenwriter. And the ambition was to do movies initially. Film, TV at the time was not as great as it is today. I mean, we're currently living through a phenomenal golden age of television, which wasn't there 20 years ago. There were great shows, but it wasn't the same. That I think cinema was much more exciting as a medium. Today, for me personally, I think TV is more exciting. And so at the time when I started writing screenplays, I was getting very frustrated in that I was selling my screenplays to the studios. I was going out to LA or here in London, making pitches, getting them sold, being hired to write the screenplays, getting into pre-production with different directors, etc. But then there would always be something, a stumbling block, right at the even when we were in pre-production, whatever, that would kill the project. So it became a very frustrating thing. Whereas TV then became something that was very immediate and happening. You'd write something, and almost, I mean, the first script I wrote for TV was for Spooks, and it wasn't the first, but almost, and it was filming 3 weeks later. So TV became a much more real. You felt much less like an imposter doing it as a writer. And then books came about accidentally, but I was lucky in that my first book did very well, and it kind of the natural decision was to park everything and just focus on the books. They're 2 very different mediums, which we'll talk about, I guess, in a little while. But yeah, I mean, that's where we are today. I'm very much focused on turning my books into TV shows. That's my current ambition. So that's what I spend a lot of my time at the moment working on that. Over to you, Sophie.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say, Raymond, I cannot pretend to have such an extensive experience in writing as yours. So I'm really honored and very happy to be with you in this talk.
Thank you.
I never considered myself to be originally a writer because my focus was on directing. I consider myself to have made a mistake when I graduated from the university where I studied directing for cinema and TV. I did a mistake of going to the non-fiction TV world because that was the only thing that was available back then. It was the only industry that opened, opportunities for jobs, for careers, etc. So I did almost 6 years of TV before actually taking the first step into kind of storytelling through music videos. So taking that step was very scary for me because it was definitely a different type of format, different type of deliverable, different type of story. But I tried, during my career as a music video director to always make the music video about a story, about a character, introducing the artists in a way that is sometimes called simple, but really to convey emotions, to put them in a certain light and a certain identity. Because back at the time we had no opportunities to really dream of making films. Until I met a colleague of mine and a friend, very dear friend, Nadia Alewat. She was my colleague at the American University in Dubai, where I work for 12 years now. And we decided to work on a short film. Writing for me was very scary because it's really something that can take you in so many different ways. You can really fail if you take your story and where it has no potential, or it can really succeed and you can open the horizons of your characters. So we started this journey, to write a short film. This is what Mahbas was supposed to be, but then we started creating the characters and they started becoming like numerous and the story started becoming more complicated. And this is where we embarked in the journey of writing the script. I remember it now as being such a challenging, stressful time, but it was very rewarding at so many times because we really believed in so many times that we're doing the right thing. We really believed in the story that we are telling and what we are trying to say in that film. And I took that script and I made it into a film. So I directed Mahbas. I am very happy when people tell me that they love the characters, they feel they're living with them, they feel that they've been with them in their living room, in their dining room, and they want to be part of their world. So this for me is amazing. And effectively the film did really well with audiences. Audiences loved it. And I'm happy to have written a story that touched people this way. Now I continue my work at the American University in Dubai as the executive director of the School of Communication. And I also teach screenwriting and production to many levels in second, third, and fourth year students.
That's great. I was just thinking, Sophie, that, I mean, it's not so unusual, is it, that great film directors, I'm thinking of people like Jonathan Glazer and Paul Thomas Anderson, who both, I think Jonathan Glazer started off doing musical videos as well before doing feature films like Sexy Beast, Birth, and I think Under Her Skin, who's, beautiful photography and stuff. I wonder how has that sort of fed into your, making the feature film and that sort of thing? Was there a sort of, because I imagine my music videos are like short films in many ways, aren't they? So I suppose you're learning a lot from that because you're telling a story within a very short space.
Yeah,
time.
maybe my kind of music videos were a bit like short films, so it wasn't really far what I did in the film. But if you want to look into details, I was doing my best to avoid my film looking like a music video, because no matter what you do, the music video is a world that you create that is a little bit, let's say, artificial, not very genuine. And I wanted the film to be real. And this is why I took what I can from the video, music video making, but not everything, especially in terms of cinematic elements like cinematography, even directing actors was different. I had to deal with a more complicated, setting, and I didn't want it to look like a music video. I found it a little bit like a weakness if my film would look like a music video. I wanted to separate both products, let's say.
There was a cinematic eye, straight a narrative that was wanted to tell, yeah, not just filming the band playing instruments, which is, yeah, that's great. And Raymond, I'm just wondering, like, I mean, I write plays, which, sort of a few plays and that sort of thing, and obviously as a playwright, you have kind of complete control of what you do, but I'd imagine that as a screenwriter writing for television, you've got many writers coming in, many producers and all this sort of thing. How much artistic control do you have? Is that hard for you when you don't have that sort of, perhaps your work is, I wonder how the whole process is, because it's a bit of a mystery to me anyway, how it all works. Could you give us some sort of insight into that?
I think it really depends on the project. There's a range of that. So it depends on whether you're writing the entire series. And nowadays, series are 6, 8, 10 episodes per season, whereas before streaming it used to be 20, 22, 24. So back then you inevitably had this is in the US. In the UK it's different, but in the US you had a writer's room, you had a whole writing staff who go to the office every day 9 to 5. You're all in a big room around a big table, got a huge board with all the different episodes and the characters, and it is a very collaborative experience in terms of creating the stories, creating the series arc, creating the characters, all that stuff. Then individual writers will disappear for 3 weeks, write the assigned episode, the episode that they will take over, if you like. Then they'll come back and join the room, and the process continues. So, and that's only at the writing level. Now, beyond that, you've got the studio that's commissioned the series, the people who have actually hired you. And then you have the broadcaster, or nowadays the streamer, more likely, who has then bought, at whatever stage of this project, the rights to, they will fund the project and who will air the project. So you have a lot of voices, you have a lot of notes, you have conflicting notes, and it can become a nightmare. It can really become kind of writing by committee. It can become, so then the other extreme of that is, for instance, series where you'll have one writer who will write the 6 or 8 episodes of a season, and it's very much a work of a it's a unique voice, it's a unique vision, and I think in those cases, if you're lucky enough to be in that position where you are allowed to lead the project from A to Z, your clout is bigger in terms of what your vision is and being able to rebut things that you disagree with, because you will inevitably get notes, and some of them will be good and some of them you disagree with. The good ones will help it become a better project. But everyone has a different opinion about anything. You go to see a movie with 10 friends, each one will have a different take on what they liked and what they didn't like. So ultimately, if you're doing something, it's your vision, it's your story. You need to fight for. So it becomes, long story short, long story long, it becomes problematic. The bigger the project, and depends on where you are in your career, how much clout you have in your career. This is something you originated. Is it your original pitch? Is it your series, or have you been hired in as a hired hand, as part of a team? In which case, are you a showrunner? Are you not a showrunner? There are many variables, but the bottom line, screenwriting for TV can become very much a committee project, which can be very frustrating for the individual writer, if you really care about it. If you don't care and you're happy to write by numbers, then hey, it's just a gig.
Just to follow up on that, so could they make changes to your work without talking to you about it first, or would they always tell you first? No.
Okay. You always, you go through story. You might submit an outline, which can be an 8, 10, 12 page outline for an episode, and then you'll write the script, and then you'll go through revisions to that script, and the closer you get to production, the smaller the revisions are, because then it becomes, it's very much there's a battle going always between what you as a writer have in mind and what you'd like to create and what production can afford to do. So it becomes a tug of war between what you'd like to achieve and what they're coming back to you say, can we combine these scenes can we put these scenes in the same location? Can we cut these characters and have this guy say those lines? Do we really need that? Can we, so it's, but as the writer of that episode, if you're part of a team, or as the writer of the entire block, you are the person to negotiate and make these changes.
Can be tough. I mean, especially when you are the holder of the vision, and you kind of want to see it materialize, and then all of a sudden there's a change of plans. But oftentimes, do you fight for it, or do you? I mean, has it ever happened when you really were resistant to any changes? Or
absolutely. It really depends on how dear the project is to your heart. I mean, there's, I remember instances I was working on a TV show with ABC in the US, and the executive was in charge of the series, and it was one guy, it wasn't a committee. So our interface was me, the producer, and the executive at ABC. And notes would come back saying, and if I disagreed with them, I'd fire off a 3-page email as to why this doesn't make sense in my mind, why it should be this way. And if you're lucky enough to have an executive who takes the time and has the time to really think about it, is very invested in the project, more often than not, he'd come back saying, thank you for articulating, as thoroughly and eloquently as always, your point of view. Yes, I can see what you're doing. Let's stick with that. But so you do fight for it. Other times, you especially when it's not really your show, you won't necessarily, you'll reach a point where you say, what, fine, and anyway, ultimately, this is only at stage one, at the writing, producing, setting up. Then, with as Sophie well knows, the director comes on board, and then it's a whole different. Then you have another take on what you've written, which again can be problematic. And then you even have actors who will, I avoid going on sets because an actor on set will inevitably see you go, hey, can we these I was thinking maybe if I said it this way, it's like something that you've thought about, you've gone through like 6 revisions to these lines, and it's like, okay, let me hear it, and this is how I'd like to say it. Okay, actually I think I prefer what's in the script, and it can be really kind of tricky. So anyway, by the time the show is done, I think you're very lucky if it resembles what you've already seen in your mind as you're writing it.
Wow. Sophie, you agree?
Yeah, of course, because what's in the writer's mind doesn't necessarily agree what's in the director's mind. And you have in the middle the producing company or the studio. Now, like I'm working on a series myself, not as a writer, as a director, but I'm involved with the writers in the process. So I give my notes, we do changes, like we work on it collaboratively, but I'm not the writer. But yes, like the producing company or the platform that this show is going to be on, they come back to you with the comments that you don't always agree on, but you have to choose your fights. So there is a lot of psychology and in this field, there is a lot of psychology. You have to understand people and really understand what you can accept without really compromising your project, and what is like off limits, like this is something you want and you want to keep it. So you kind of choose your fights. And I would like to like not disappoint the writers. Like I would like to be, there's certain understanding, visual understanding that has to be there for me, not to really, not disappoint the writers, but disappoint the scripts. Like it has a potential that has to be out there. And I would love to like have I'm not the kind of a director who takes the script and then massacres the script again. I respect it. Like this is the final draft, And this is what should be done. Like, I cannot just, maybe I will decide to throw a few scenes here and there that I find on the level of the editing that I can live without them. The story is not affected. And maybe with those scenes, my episode would be compromised like negatively. I would take these decisions, but not really make major changes where the writer doesn't recognize their script anymore. I wouldn't do that. I would rather work as a director on the script with the script writers, make sure we all align, we all agree, like my comments are taken into consideration. If not, they have to convince me, and then go to directing. So yeah, I love this collaboration, and I think it's very important. And we still can do it in this part of the world. You know, here we have platforms like Shahid, companies, big companies who produce for Shahid, and there are the talents who are like us, the writers, the directors. And there is still a conversation that goes on that is more or less flexible, maybe more than in the UK or in the US, where things are maybe more rigid, let's say, more businessy. You know, here you have a little bit more room for this creative freedom a bit.
And sorry, Rulika.
Go ahead, Adam.
Sure. No, I was just wondering about sort of then writing and directing process, how that works for you both, you know, sort of how ideas happen, inspiration. Are there sort of specific ways of going in? I know David Lynch talks about sort of falling in love with an idea. I mean, he's a writer and director, but, you know, it's this sort of falling in love with an idea and kind of just going into that. You know, and I guess as well, on top of that as well, the sort of the physical, are you writing on the computer straight away? What software are you using? What you know, how does that all work for you? Raymond, yeah.
I think, I mean, certainly for the books, and I think at the moment there's so much material out there. There's so much, you know, you can write a book on your Word software and upload it to Kindle yourself, and you have a book that's available to readers. So there's so much out there. Content, IP is just TV. I mean, look at how many great shows are there that you don't have time to watch now because there's just so much of it. So, which I think raises the bar a lot. And I mean, I've always felt that it's one of the golden rules of writing that you read as you're, you know, trying to get into it, where I can only write something in terms of something I've generated myself, and very much in terms of, particularly for books, it has to be a book that I can't not write. It has to be an idea that just won't let go of me. So, you know, American publishers, when my first book came out and it was a bestseller, the publishers wanted 2 books a year. You know, because the more you publish, the more you sell. It's weird. It feeds on itself. And it was my first book, but I very quickly knew that that's not the way I operate. So I needed to find a great idea that I couldn't let go of, that really merited being written, because ultimately a book that comes out is going to be on the shelf forever. It's going to be available forever. It's got your name on it. It better be something you're super proud of. Otherwise, you know, and it's also very long effort. I mean, my books take from inception to delivery, or to publication, let's say, well, certainly to delivery. It's easily 1.5 years, 2 years. So if you're living with that story, if you're living with these characters, you really have to be in love with them, or it's going to be a nightmare relationship. Very different from if you're writing, you know, a lot of writers have very successful careers writing shorter books. They're crime thrillers or whatever, that they might be 70,000, 80,000 words. They might write 4 of them a year, 6 of them a year. They can do very well. They can sell, you know, 1 million copies on through Kindle and stuff. And so, you know, different people work different ways. My books tend to be quite big, you know, they're 150,000, 160,000 words, more or less. So they're quite chunky. The typical thriller is around 100. Yes, they're heavy. Typical thrillers are maybe 100,000 words. You know, if you're looking at and which has nothing to do with, they can be great books. It's not, I love a Harlan Coben or a Reed Child 100,000 word thriller, fantastic reads, but it's a different kind of story. Whereas a Stephen King or a Dan Brown book might be 200,000 words. So I'm saying they take a lot of work, they take a lot of research, a lot of, so yeah, you need to really find, and you don't look for it, it just comes to you.
The idea.
Stephen King has a great view of this, which is he doesn't keep a notebook. He says the notebook is a repository of crap ideas. So, you'll write an idea, if you're saving it, don't bother saving it. If it's a great idea, it's going to stick in your mind. You're not going to be able to get rid of it, and you're going to want to write it, even if it's here. If it's 10 years later, I'm working on something now that I first thought of 10 years ago. The Sign was something I thought of 4 years before I wrote it, because I had to figure out a way to do it without getting a fatwa on myself. So, the ideas will just come when you can't force them. From that point on, if it doesn't let go of you, then you just go with it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'd like to add also that you're 100% right. You have to really fall in love with the idea, because it's going to live with you for quite some time. And there's going to be time where you hate it because you're stuck or you don't believe in it anymore, and this love brings you back to it. Like if it's really something that you want to tell, these ups and downs happen, but at least you keep going. If this is an idea that you're not very attached to, you can let go easily of the whole writing of the whole project. But if you really love it, it's like really when loving someone, you don't let go easily. So you have your ups and downs, but you keep going and you stay with that partner or that person, and you don't give up. So there must be a lot of love for the idea when you start working on it, because really it takes time. And like for our script now, also for the second script, it's months of writing and rewriting. And we've learned and we've experimented, and writing is about rewriting. So sometimes you're starting again, like for the scripts, you're starting again from a blank page. So you're not only correcting on the existing draft, but you are just putting the first draft and the second and the third on the side, and you're starting with a blank document and starting to write again. So if you are not in love with this idea, you're going to drop it.
And the characters, Sophie, you feel like you spend a long time with the characters, bringing them to life, seeing them pulsate and breathe. How important are the characters, for this relationship with your script?
Yeah, for me, they come first. I look at it as a viewer, sometimes not only as a writer. What really gets me attached to the story is not the story itself, but who is it happening to? Like, whose story is it? If I really love the characters and care about them, I'll care about their story. So for me, characters come first, and it's ideal for me, and maybe I didn't reach that ideal yet in my career, to really invest a lot of thinking and depth and time into writing characters who are living characters, who are really 3D, who are jumping off the pages, and then the rest will come. I'm sure the story matters, but you have to give importance to characters, because if you don't make them real in their world, it doesn't have to be real like a copy of life, but real in their world, I don't think, in my opinion, a story can fly. So it has to be the characters first. People get attached to people, and they want to know more about them. They are scared for them. They are worried about them. And if you don't have a real character that people can connect to, I cannot see how they can be connected to the story.
Right. So the characters come first. They come before the plot for you.
For me, yeah.
And Raymond, what do you think about the priority here between character and plot, and how different is it from the novels? Because when you're writing a novel, you're portraying the characters through words. It's different. Maybe you need to put in more effort to describe what they're thinking, for example. It's not all an extrinsic view of the character, but there's so much going on inside. Whereas when you write for the movie, people will later on see the characters physically and see what they do. How? I mean, how do you tackle this?
They're very different mediums in the sense that obviously in a book you can, as you say, you can write the thoughts of a person. You can describe their memories, what they're thinking about, some in association. You're immersing yourself, especially if you're writing in the first person. The reader is becoming that the character that they're reading through. So I think the immersive experience of in getting involved in a character's life can be much stronger in a novel than in certainly in a movie. In TV, you have time to build character. You have time to build backstory. You can see it. You can live it. You have that scope, which you can enjoy in a novel as well. I think for in a feature, in a 90 to 120 minute feature, it's tough to build that same connection. I think, and I mean, look at movies nowadays. It's either the massive visual, big budget events of the Marvel films or whatever, or much smaller, personal, more art housey films. The middle ground is kind of gone because I mean for many reasons. But anyway, for me, my books they start with a story because there's a theme I'm interested in exploring. There's a question, a what if, that's important to me. So the what if is what brings me to the project. I have to write about that what if. In the sanctuary, why do we age and die? What do we know about that? Is that something that's medically predetermined, or is it a bunch of medical conditions, illnesses that we can, and if we fix that, could we live to 1,000 healthily? So that question, as a general question, becomes, okay, what if there was a way to overcome it? Well, how would the world change? And exploring that then leads to, okay, so where's the suspenseful thriller story in that? So that's what gets me into an idea. That's what hooks me, and I want to explore that. I want to live that. Now, once I have that, then the key to actually start writing it is, who is this happening to? And that's the toughest part of the puzzle, because it's easier to come up with the huge what if. Who do you choose? And I don't write series. I mean, some of my characters, I've had a few books where we met the same character again, but generally they've been standalones, which means you have to invent new characters for each book. So you're creating new characters, new backstories that you want to fall in love with and get really attached to, that are right for the story. And why are they? Why is that story happening to them? Because when you're going to remember a book you've read, you're not going to remember, oh, it's the story of a sign that appears in the sky and whatever. No, it's the story of a guy who lost whose brother gets killed in the desert, and he won't give up until he finds out why his brother was killed, and it drags him into. It's a story of something that happens to a character. If your pitch for a story is it's the story of something that happens, that's the wrong pitch. You have the wrong focus on the story. So for me, it's a combination of the two, the plot and who it happens to. They come together.
Maybe a little more strongly so towards the character. As you said, it's who it's happening to.
What's driving your writing is the character. My first couple of books, I did outline. The first one was an adaptation of a screenplay. So I had scene by scene. I had a lot of dialogue. I had the whole book mapped out as a very long and overly long, detailed screenplay. The second book I outlined. The third book much less. Now I don't outline. If you have the right characters, and you have the right setup, and they have the right motivations, and you have the right what if question mark that they're all living in, I just let them go. I let them run, and then that's the pleasure of the writing, is discovering what these guys are doing. And then you find yourself, you can't stop writing because you don't know what they're going to do. And actually, a good example is, again, in The Sanctuary, which was only the second book. Halfway through writing it, I was at a place where one of my lead characters had a guy in the car with him who was badly injured. And I had written him into a situation where really the only thing he could do to save himself was to dump this guy and leave him for dead, or even to kill him. But he's our lead, and he can't do something that nasty. But it was the only logical thing for him to do to save himself. Now, this is a fictional character and a fictional word that's still on my laptop. I could just go back and rewrite or just trash that, the last couple of times, and just rewrite it in a way that he doesn't have to come. But that gave me a really great moment for him where he has to decide, like, what is this guy really about? And I thought, no, you know what? He's going to kill him. And I went back and seeded a few lines here and there to just change his backstory a bit, to put more. And as the book evolved, this guy became something completely different. And I remember sending that first half to my publishers in New York and in London, and my agents, and they read it, and they called me and they said, "What the fuck? Like, what happened? Like, he's a murderer now, and oh my God, I need to read the rest. What's going to happen?" And it was totally unexpected. And I think it became a much better book for it. But it wasn't planned. The character did what was logical at that moment.
Yeah, I think it takes courage, Rula, to go that way. I mean, this is how the writers should do it, but it takes courage because sometimes the characters take you to places you don't want to go. Like you want to go, and then, or if you reach to these places, the story gets so complicated in a way that you can't find the solution easily, and sometimes writers fall in that trap where they do not take their character where they're supposed to go. They take them in different directions that are not genuine or organic to the kind of story they're telling, or to what the character does, the way they're built. So they take the story in a different and much weaker, road and path. While all they should do, and I can sense that when I teach my students, and they choose the easy way, but the easy way is the worst way, that you always have to go where your character takes you, even if you find a problem you think you're not going to be able to solve. When you reach that problem, you have to solve it. So what Raymond is saying now is just like a great example of how he changed like the whole course of his character's journey and made him a murderer, just because it naturally took him there. And that takes a lot of courage, especially for beginners, for writers who are beginning, their...
No, absolutely. I mean, that's a very good point, is that, this comes with experience. I wrote that book after I had written so much TV I'd written, after I'd sold screenplays. I'd been writing effectively for over 10 years at that point. And, what does, Malcolm Gladwell says, you need 10,000 hours of practice of doing anything before you reach a level where, you could be good at it. I mean, and so I do think, yes, there's a natural storytelling instinct that you either have or you don't have. I'm not sure it can be taught. But yes, it does take experience and confidence in your storytelling ability, and being said, I know this is going to work out. I know it's going to take, it's not going to take 400,000 words or 40,000 words. It's going to work out within a reasonable framework of what it should be.
You're always sure when you're writing your novel. You're always sure. You never have doubts.
No. Sorry, it's awful to say, but I really don't.
No, it's amazing.
Is that because, Raymond, they're so alive to you? They're so sort of well integrated that you're at that point. Why are you so sure?
Because as long as this, the setup is right, if the question, the intention, if the intent that they're after is clear enough in their minds, and if they're well enough defined as characters, so you have their intentions and you have them as people, and you have the obstacles that are going to be facing them, then it's enough. It's going to work out, because you'll get there.
and I guess that's why you have the freedom now not to outline, because by doing that, you might then be crowbarring or shoehorning something in. Whereas the surprise, I mean, you answered two questions I was going to ask about whether you outline or not, and also talking about those happy accidents, the sort of serendipity that come along the way, and you answered that as well. But I wonder if there's any more. I mean, maybe Sophie, you might have something to say about that, because again, going back to David Lynch, who even while directing, even while the story is, he knows the story, something might happen on set. And famously in Twin Peaks, something happened, I think backstage, where someone was seen on camera, and he actually used that. This became part of the sort of
but I think his work is particularly, he's very much an auteur. His work has a kind of a surreal element. He can afford to play around with things like that. I don't think you couldn't do that in Adam Sorkin couldn't do that in one of his TV shows, or it's different genres, I think.
Yeah, I suppose that's coming from one of the advantages of being the writer and director, as well as that you're able to sort of take the story.
Of course.
But are there moments, Sophie, where directing where you happy accidents occur, and something that you think is wrong actually ends up feeding into?
No, I am not that type at all. I orchestrate my shooting like it already happened. So when I go to my shooting, it's so organized. I can come up with plan Bs in case of emergencies, and that's it. But normally the days are all measured, because also you have a lot of challenges. You are always, your budget is never enough for you. Like, for example, in my film, I didn't have one additional shot to use in my editing. So all the shots, and it's a very minimal coverage. So I didn't go overboard with angles and stuff, because I didn't have the time and the money to do it. So I had 29 days of shooting, and I had to make it work. I had to pass on all these emotions, make my audience understand my characters, keep it all interesting, preserve the pace and the vibes of the story in such a limited time. So I had to study it very well and not keep anything for surprises, unless we had to. Like sometimes the weather could play a bad, it can be, because I shot in the mountains and we had fog for so many days. You have to reschedule and stuff like that, but not major changes. We can't afford it. I don't have millions. I had less than $1 million to make that film. Now also for my series, it's going to be really, really tight, in terms of production days. So I like to go to my shooting blindfolded, I know what I'm doing. I rehearsed very well with my actors. Everybody knows their role and we're safe. I like that.
Great. Rula, do you have a question? Or?
Would like to ask both Raymond and Sophie about their most recent or their forthcoming works. Maybe we could have a little sneak peek. So Raymond, would you like to start?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, at the moment, I'm really focused on turning my novels into TV series. So I've written the pilot episode for Empire of Lies, and I'm negotiating with a production company that has a good track record in bringing books to TV or to film. But it's early days, and exploring. Some of them are something like The Sign, for instance, is very clear as a feature for me, but less clear as a series. So that's kind of I'm taking my time and having fun doing that.
And your Empire of Lies, it comes with two titles, right? So it's under one title in the UK and another title in the US?
Yeah.
Okay.
It happens sometimes. I hated both titles. Both titles were not, it was a big fight with both publishers. And it was a fight I lost, which was really irritating. I wrote the book under the title Caliphate. And And it's a word that was problematic at different levels for the publishers. Because of the political connotations of the word. There were even comments like, people don't know the word. I'm like, who doesn't know the word caliphate? If they don't know the word caliphate, they're not going to appreciate the book. They shouldn't read this book because they're not going to enjoy the book. They don't even know what the word caliphate means. But anyway, so yeah, so so I had to come up with alternatives, and I think Empire of Lies might be a bit more palatable to me. Ottoman Secret, I thought, was such a dumbed down, kind of obvious title for a book that my UK publishers, who are extremely prestigious. So I mean, I'm being very open. I was kind of embarrassed that is that the best you guys can do, and they just loved it. I threw it out as like almost like it's something like that, and they're like, oh no, we love that, and it's like no, not that. So anyway, so. Maybe if you ever see it as a series, it might be called Caliphate. I don't know. But I doubt
Why
it.
not?
I doubt it.
And we'll know the story behind it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the Caliphate webcast, where the podcast on the New York Times podcast, Caliphate, was one of the most listened to podcasts of that year, and it had over 2 million subscribers in the 2 years that it was running, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, around the time that I was writing the book. So it was extremely like, what more do you need?
And it's got so much potency. Even if you're not familiar with it, it becomes your word almost. You know what I mean?
You go through. You can be in business with the most prestigious or highly respected people on the planet. You may know the story behind the Last Templar, which I've talked about many times before, where the short version of it is, wrote it as a screenplay, get a massive offer from a New York publisher, the biggest, one of the big three in New York, fly to New York to sign a deal, and oh, by the way, we'd like to change something in the story. All this stuff about religion, it's boring, let's lose it. Let's turn the Templar secret into diamonds or jewels or something, which is the same. This was in 96. So this would be like telling Dan Brown for the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, exactly.
The secret, at the core of the book is not the bloodline of Christ and his descendants, but it's a diamond. And this was, the most powerful, Googling that publisher, her nickname is the Kingmaker. And I had to say no and walk away from that deal. And this is, and you think, surely they know what they're doing. Surely that the person who publishes Tom Clancy and Patricia Cornwell knows that this is what the book should be. But my gut told me this is a crap decision. And I walked away from the deal. And 10 years later, when it came out as The Last Templar with everything in the script, it became a global bestseller. So I thought, maybe I'm not such an idiot after all. So with Caliphate and Empire of Lies, Ottoman Secret, I was like, no, I know they're crap titles, but it's either I walk away or I accept. And I went for it.
Yeah, amazing story. And that must have taken a lot of guts to walk away from that. I mean, that's so early in your career.
I had no money. I had a baby on the way. I'd felt blasphemous writing this book. I'd researched it for a year and a half. I felt, I was raised in a Catholic household, so I felt like I'm really, I'm going to burn in hell for this thing. But it was such a strong story that I just had to write it. And I felt turning it into a sub-national treasure kind of diamond hunt was a completely brain-dead decision.
Amazing.
Wow. And Sophie, would you like to tell us about your newest plans?
Yeah, I'm as I said, I'm now working on a series that's going to be a 12-episode series to go on an Arab platform. I'm gladly and luckily working with one of the biggest production houses in the Arab world. I'm lucky also to have the writers as my friends, and one of them was my colleague in my master. So we get along, we agree on things. When we disagree, it's for the best of the story. And we're going to production in July. I'm shooting over July and August for 2 months. I'm now casting my actors. And this is also something that the production company and the platform will interfere in. And I have to pick my fights then when this happens, because they, they think about names and who is going to be like in that and this role, and are they known or not? And I will be looking for talents. So this is the fight that I'm gonna have to fight. And on the side, I'm very shyly and not really aggressively doing that, but I started working on my next feature film, building the characters and just like the main storyline. And I'm dedicating now a bit more time to like taking it more seriously, setting some deadlines for myself. But this is going to be a future project. So the shorter term thing is the series that I'm going to direct soon.
And this will be your first series, Sophie.
Yeah, it will be my first series.
Mm-hmm. And we all look greatly forward to it. Sophie, is there a link where people can watch the movie, or is it still on Netflix?
It's on Netflix. Yeah, for those who are in the Middle East.
Here? Okay.
Middle East and North Africa, yes, it's on Netflix. We do not have it on Vimeo or any other platform other than Netflix. I mean, for streaming. But those who would like to watch it from our audience, I may be able to send them a link, but it's a bit tricky because it's very confidential. So they shouldn't share it with anyone. But like if it's like 1 or 2 people, maybe I can do that. And it's available on DVD, but it was released in 2017. So DVDs back then were still a thing, but now nobody watches DVDs anymore. So yeah, Netflix is like the easiest way to watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how they've turned from an almost endangered form to almost extinct right now.
Exactly. Endangered. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you both so much, Raymond and Sophie. This is truly a great honor having you both with us tonight. It's not over yet, but the audience has so many questions in the chat box ready to ask. And so we will take it from there. We will start with the first question. There are so many. To scroll back up. Okay, Glenda is asking what's the name of the movie. We already put the title in the chat box. Gabrielle Cabanos is asking.
Sorry, I have to cut you because on Netflix they will find it in the title of Solitaire.
Ah, Solitaire. Okay, right.
Yeah.
So let us write that down. And the question from scrolling up again. Up. Okay, Gabrielle, sometimes actors, Ad-Lib, improvise some lines in a scene. Do they impact how you direct or write a scene? Gabrielle, I believe your question is for both Raymond and Sophie, right? Okay, I believe it is.
I think maybe more for Sophie, since because it's more a directing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if like based on my experience, I have I give a lot of importance for dialogue, and it's not like by choice. And actors don't get to, because actors in the Arab world tend to do that. They tend to try to say the same thing but with different words. This doesn't work with me because I worked very hard on my dialogues. Now I'm working also with the writers on our dialogues, and the way a dialogue line resonates, the way it's written, for me it's kind of sacred. Like I'd rather during rehearsals just like lock the dialogue. If they have any issues, they want to change some lines, they feel that the pronunciation may be a bit heavy for them in some lines here and there, we change them. But when we go to the set, it's set in stone. I give a lot of importance to dialogue because I don't want it to be like something loose that they can play with. I'd rather be a little bit rigid on that front.
Hey, thank you. Another question by Muhammad Al-Hamadi. As you've mentioned, characters come first. What comes after the characters to make something a success? Also, how do you deal with situations where you don't like what you're writing halfway through, as the characters you liked in the beginning aren't giving you the same motivation to continue anymore? In these scenarios, do you still continue or do you drop it?
Well, that's not for Raymond, because Raymond never doubts himself. He's all the way, like, you know, like a rocket. This definitely is for me, because I have so many doubts throughout. Yes, I am that type, and I think it's the character that reflects, you know, your way of working. So because I am always questioning, you know, myself, and questioning my talent, and questioning, like, am I doing the right thing, or am I going to like it? Because for me, I have to like it first. It doesn't matter if 100 people tell me you've done a great job. If I don't believe I did a great job, I don't care. So I don't really fall in the trap of like taking the compliments and being happy about it. If I am convinced, I would really be happy. So yes, I mean, again, if you start with a story and characters that you love, and you start talking about them like real people, when you give them names, you start saying, let's say Raymond does that but doesn't do that, so you start talking about them like real people. Of course, for me, I have downs sometimes, but it keeps me going regardless. So there's nothing called you can't continue anymore. If you love the characters, you've worked so hard on creating them, you've been, you know, working on the story for so long, I don't think I can drop a project like that. No, I have to continue doing it regardless of the fears and of the challenges I face.
And Raymond, do you have anything to add? Or
No, it's, I think for me, I spent so much time creating the characters before I started writing that, you know, once I start writing, I'm, you know, pretty comfortable that they're the right people I should be hanging out with.
Okay, that's great. There's a question for you here, Raymond, by Glenda. It says, I understand you wrote the screenplay for The Last Templar before you wrote the book. How different was writing the novel from the screenplay compared to the other way around? What problems did you have to resolve?
Not so much problems. It's just the novel offered more opportunity to expand on things that I didn't have room to do in the screenplay. Particularly, I think the one thing that came out, and actually, ironically, it's what, so the screenplay was called The Last Templar, and it's a character. And there were 5 flashback scenes in the screenplay of this Last Templar back in the time of the Crusades. 5 key points in his life, and it's the driving force to the present day mystery that the characters are involved in. In the book, that Last Templar's life became a much bigger thing. The chapters were able to not just be 2-minute flashback clips in a movie, but actual fully fledged chapters. So we found out a lot about this guy. He became a much more developed, a fully developed character that he was actually, so in a way, the title of the book was much more, made a lot more sense, and was much more respectful of the content than it was in the screenplay. The Last Templar became a major part of that book. Otherwise, the book pretty much followed the screenplay. Structurally, it was the same story. Tess didn't have a daughter in the screenplay, but again, because you have more time. You know, the story was already, ultimately, it was a mistake it was never made. It was very tough to make it as a 2-hour movie, and ultimately, it was made as a 4-hour TV miniseries, and even that was pushing it. So in the novel, you had time to expand on these characters' lives and the backstories. There's no way you couldn't do in a 2-hour movie because there was so much plot going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things with TV now, isn't it? That we can sort of, you know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think of Lost, for example, do you remember when Lost first came out. That was one of the, in every episode, you would go back and relive the backstory of one or two of the characters who are part of this plane crash. And it was phenomenally enjoyable. You really get immersed in these characters. The present day situation was intriguing, but their backstory fed that, and it was just brilliant. Whereas there's no way you could have done that as a movie.
No. Yeah.
We have a message from Alan Sawan. Alan says, I would like to thank Raymond for endorsing my second novel, The Ghost. Also, his feedback made the book much better. I had to rewrite it based on his feedback. That's a message for you,
Yes.
Raymond.
No, I can see Alan. Hey, Alan, good to see you. Yeah, Alan reached out to me on Facebook. We talked, and he sent me the manuscript, and it was a great pleasure to be able to help out in whatever small way I could. So, and actually, I have to say that's something I discovered very early on in the writing world, was that it's a very different experience from film and TV in terms of the quality of people involved. Film and TV, I can't say I've kept many good friendships from the few years I was in that world. Whereas in publishing, from day one, throughout my, maybe I was lucky, but people who are in publishing and who write do it because they love doing it. They're in publishing because they love books, and it's a very genuine kind of person that you meet in that world, and writers help each other out. I've had, I was lucky enough to become friends with people who I was reading before my first book got published, and suddenly they became people I met through book festivals or through mutual friends or whatever. And at some point, one of us gets stuck in a plot or and you get an email from someone. It's like, what do you think of that? And it's like, wow. And the I mentioned before, Steve Berry, who was a big name, congratulating me at the time. And I remember after at that dinner, his wife said, Steve was so thrilled that you responded to his, I'd say, thank you. So, and I was like, who wouldn't respond to such a nice email? She'd say, oh, you'd be surprised how many people just, ignore that. So
yeah, they ignore.
yeah.
I'm an exception, Raymond, so we gotta.
Absolutely, no. There are, but exceptions are much more valued because they're exceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So next question.
And sorry, thank you, Alan, for mentioning that.
Next question, Rashid. Rashid asks, why should we not go for the nonfiction side of the world? Why is it a mistake to do so?
I think it's related to something you said, Sophie, about the beginning of your career.
I can't relate. I didn't understand the question. I'm so sorry. What does he mean?
You said that at the beginning. You were like, when you started your journey of doing this, you were like, the biggest mistake was taking that route.
Oh, yeah. The biggest mistake for me, because I didn't dare, like back then there were, if you wanted to work in anything related to filmmaking, it had to be advertising agencies, honestly. Like I am in Lebanon, I graduated from Lebanon, and that was the closest thing back then when I graduated to filmmaking. So you create short stories, short films, advertisements. I didn't dare to go in that world because I was afraid of it. And I felt TV is easier for me. But for the path that I chose for myself later on, I think it would have been a better choice for me to start with a world that looks more like filmmaking than nonfiction TV. So it's not a mistake in general, but I mean, for me, I should have dared, because my first music video was an amazing chance that my sister Julia Boutros gave to me. She's a very picky artist, and I think that first music video that I did for her is very, very dear to my heart, because she decided then to trust me, although I had never had any experience in that kind of productions. And she said, just pitch an idea, and if I like it, just direct my song. And it's a beautiful song, and I didn't want to ruin it at all, because it's an amazing song and it's timeless. So that was my first step towards, let's say, filmmaking. But I had that chance because my sister pushed me and she encouraged me to do it. Otherwise, it would have been a very, very hard step to make between being a TV director for nonfiction formats and to move into the filmmaking world. So that's why I said I should have maybe started since graduation with something more related to filmmaking than nonfiction formats and TV. That's it.
Thank you. I get it now. Thank you.
Thank you. And next question, Muhammad Hamadi. Have you ever had a situation where you did have a small doubt, but it worked out, like in the beginning? I guess it applies to both.
I think we answered that already.
Yeah, already. Okay. Another one by Gabrielle. You mentioned how chaotic the writing process is. So how do you make sure you don't end up burning out from writing? Or maybe, what do you do when taking a break? It's a very practical question.
I'll let Raymond answer that.
I think when I'm writing something, when I take breaks, I read, and I read something that's in the same general thematic world of what I'm writing. It can be nonfiction, or it can be other novels that are set in that world. So I like to keep myself in that frame of mind. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, certainly writing a book is not a for me, it's not a daily regimented scheduled thing. I'll have weeks when I'm writing like crazy and weeks when I'm not writing at all. It comes and goes. And that's one of the pleasures, actually, is that you can enjoy your downtime and do the things that you like. I think Aaron Sorkin once said that he takes like 6 or 7 showers a day, because whenever he gets blocked writing, he goes off, showers, changes his clothes, and then comes back and then kind of starts writing like it's a new day, like it's a new start, even if it's in the same day. So I think you just do whatever clears your mind and allows you to kind of reset, because you can't just stay focused. It becomes tunnel vision. You have to go out and just clear your mind, and then you'll see things you didn't see before.
I like the idea of taking a shower for writer's block.
Yeah, 6 or 7 a day might be not sure.
Yes. Sophie, the next question is for you from Glenda. Where did you get the idea? Where did the idea for Mahbas originate from? Did you cast the actors yourself?
Yeah. Thank you, Glenda. Actually, it was a proposal that happened in my family, that we were inspired by. It was a very funny proposal that has nothing to do, honestly, with Mahbas. Now, after Mahbas, like we wrote the final story, but where it came from, it was someone in my family who was going to propose with his parents to a girl, like to her family. And in Lebanon, there's a problem of electricity, and it cuts at 6 and at 12, 6 and 12. So they had to plan the visit before 6, because the girl lives in the 6th floor or 5th floor. So they can take the elevator. They had to plan their visit before 6 p.m. before the electricity cuts, so they can reach to their house, etc. So it was a funny idea for us, even for the proposal, this has to be planned and thought of, like this little detail that really is very important. But we ended up telling a different story about a different proposal. We thought a lot about the Lebanese-Syrian relationship, and it was in our discussions, Nadia and I, how this relationship is complicated, how it is love and hate, and how it originates in the history of the two countries and the history of, the Lebanese war, and that this proposal can be between these two entities, let's say, between a Lebanese girl and a Syrian guy. And we started writing the story based on that. Now the casting actors, definitely the difference between like working on an independent film and what I'm doing now with the production company and a platform is that I had the freedom to choose my actors the way I wanted. So if I just do a casting for a character once and I fall in love with that actor, I just take him or her immediately because I am convinced. So nobody else has of course, my producer, who is also my co-writer, has a say. I'm not a dictator after all. I'm not that much of a dictator, but I loved that. I love that I can just like decide, and do what I believe in, and nobody has the right to tell me anything. It was really amazing. And I'm very proud of my cast because some of them were beginners and some of them were big names in the Arab world. And they were so professional. They loved the script and they worked with me like I've directed a million films before, which was like an amazing chance for me. I've never done films before and they gave me all their trust. So yeah, so that, like, I always talk about this experience with a lot of happiness and passion because really it was so enjoyable, and the actors became friends. And now one of them actually, the Syrian father, is my main actor in my series. He's an amazing actor. His name is Bassam Kousa, and he's really like a leading name in the in Syrian and Arab drama in general. Oh yeah.
Yes, he is. He is indeed. I mean, he was one of the most loved characters in the movie. So many
Yes.
people were speaking about the father of the groom.
Yes.
And, this is the most inspiring story about electricity in Lebanon that I've heard and that I think I will ever hear.
It's so funny, like they had to fix the time, like we cannot go at 6 because the electricity will go, and it's just like the dailies of Lebanon, like this is how it is.
Yeah. Well, it prompted a good movie, so that's great.
Thank you.
Abdullah Matrushi asks another question for Sophie. Which of your works is the closest to your heart?
It's two actually. It's, as I said, my first music video, Lab Ahlamak. It was a black and white, very simple music video. It was not pretentious at all, but I love that music video. I was terrified when I was directing it, but I love the outcome of it. And my film, because I got to prove to myself, that I can do it, and I'm happy that I did it. It doesn't mean that I am totally accepting of everything, and I always criticize myself. I always watch and say, I could have done this better. If I had the chance, I would have changed this and that. I always criticize my work very much, but still I'm proud of that achievement because it didn't come easy. We were independent. We didn't have any production companies, supporting us. We just had to go and knock doors and get the funding and do everything on our own. So it's really something I'm proud of.
Hey, thank you, Sophie. The next question is for Raymond. The question by Salama. Have you ever began writing about a subject that you afterwards came to despise and decided to ignore? If so, could you tell us what it was?
Honestly, I can't think of one because I wouldn't embark on writing something if I hadn't done a lot of work into it. That meant that I had to go and I had to do it.
Okay, well that's good to know. So you don't waste your time with ideas that will not potentially become, have something come out of them.
No, I might research them, but to actually start writing something, no. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The next question is also for you, Raymond, by Glenda. Do you prefer writing a feature film or a series? Maybe it's for both, because the next part is definitely for you. The first part, Sophie could also answer. How can you turn a novel into a series without padding and repetition?
Raymond.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, I'm just looking for it. Writing a feature film or a series. At the moment, I think series is much more enjoyable. because it just gives you so much more scale. How can you turn a novel into a series without padding and repetition? If it's a novel that's worth turning into a series, there's so much more that you can explore and have fun with in a series. It's never about padding. I mean, you know, some production companies or studios would obviously like to extend the life of an idea as long as possible. You know, why have one season if we can get 10 seasons out of this? But as a creative, you know, you've got to be try to be true to the material and just write what it deserves to be. If it's 10 episodes, it's 10 episodes and no more.
And Sophie,
No,
feature
I guess Raymond like answered, and it's enough because he's the one who's like really deep into this, and I wanted to just hear his response.
All right. Zahra is asking the next question. How do you deal with the feeling of fear that your work won't be successful?
Me. Like, it shouldn't be too big. Like you should not let fear really eat you up and stop you from continuing the work. I always look at my fear or anxiety or worry, whatever you want to call it, as something positive. Like I'm always thinking that, yes, I care enough. I'm not taking anything for granted. I'm asking the right questions. I am challenging myself to think more. And only something good can come out of this because I'm really putting my heart in it. Yes, sometimes I am more afraid than I should, but I stop myself. Like if I really want to do, like, for example, now in my previous experience and now, I want to do it. I want to, I'm passionate about this and I want to continue doing it and I want to succeed. For example, in the area of Lebanese drama, Lebanese Syrian drama, I want to leave my mark. I want to do something different. And I want to watch my series with less criticism, with the least criticism possible. So yes, like when you're passionate and you love what you're doing, you overcome your fear definitely. So you don't let it really grow like a monster. No, it is there. It's just guiding you to do better, to not to settle for any easy solution, and that's it.
Oh. And Raymond, do you ever feel this way as well? Any fear?
Never.
No, I mean, you can't, you don't write expecting, if you're going to embark on writing a book, you got to be convinced that it's a really good story. If you do it well, it has a pleasure. Now, it may not be as popular as you hoped it would be. It might not sell as many copies as you, but like I'm really happy with the way all the books turned out. I wouldn't change anything about them. And some of them might hit better than others, but it's not a factor in, like, I wouldn't not write something because I don't think it's going to be popular.
Yeah.
Like if I write for myself. If it's something I'm going to enjoy reading, I'm going to write it. Because I think there's got to be enough idiots like me out there who are going to also enjoy reading the stuff I like reading.
Well, that's great to know. I mean, if you like it enough, you know that there will be other people out there who are also going to like it. So yeah.
You're writing for yourself. If the only things you like reading are really obscure books that have only sold 5 copies or really obscure movies that no one's ever seen, then you may have a problem in terms of how widely received your work's going to be. But if you tend to like things that tend to be popular, if you like Harlan Coben and Lee Child or whatever, and then your taste is quite well-rounded, then if you do a halfway decent job, the odds are it'll be okay.
The next question kind of feeds into this one as well. Is there any part of writing that is hard? If yes, have you ever asked for help?
Facing a blank page, beginning, the first sentence is a pretty hard thing when you imagine you've got another 500 pages to another year and a half of writing this thing. So that's a pretty daunting experience. That's the biggest obstacle to overcome in terms of
Does the first sentence you write usually stay the first sentence, or does it change with time?
It can change. Also, the first chapter might change. You can write something, you can set off at a place where the present day story starts, but then you go back and you decide you want to put a prologue in, or you want to shuffle. So no, nothing's cast in stone. As you get deeper into the book, things can change.
Thani asks, how many attempts does it take you until you are sure that you have perfected your writing?
There's no correct answer to that. It's, some people will need 20 drafts of a script before they're happy with it. Some people can do it in 3. So it all depends on where you are in your career, and your experience, and your self-confidence
Yeah. But
Sophie?
I have to add that it depends, the attempts need to really be attempts, like it's not, you don't call it an attempt if you're just like editing your work. So you're really rebuilding your story. In scripts, you're reworking on the structure, on the plot, on the storyline, on building your characters, like more strongly taking them to their best potential. So it's serious work and serious attempts. But yes, as Raymond said, there is no recipe. After 5 drafts, khalas, you have your best script and go ahead with it. It doesn't go that way. It's not math. It depends how much work you've done and how much potential your story still has to improve and to engage and engage your readers or your audience better.
Yeah, the word attempt is like you haven't written it yet. It's like, it doesn't really apply to once it's done. A comment from Alex Nassar. The Last Templar is a nice book. I enjoyed reading it. Zahra, I think we answered that question before about characters coming first. Glenda, we also answered the question about the whether it's in Netflix Ireland. Wad, I believe we only have time for one more question. I'm really sorry about that. Wad asks, what is the most important skill the director should have? Question is for you, Sophie.
Most important skill. Like, I'm gonna say what I tell my students. It's not only the creative side, which is very, very important, but it's also the leadership skills. Because everybody on set and before, like in pre-production, are looking at you to make decisions, like to decide about a color, to decide about the type of lens we're going to use for this shot, the movement, the camera movement, the word we're going to create for the character, the dress, the outfits, everything is up to you to decide yes or no, works, doesn't work, what do we change, etc. So people are looking at you like in the middle of your eyes and like waiting for answers. And they're waiting for guidance, and they're waiting for, directives, like how, in which direction to go, etc. So I think, first of all, a director needs to be a good leader in, not in terms of authority or being like harsh or anything like that, but understanding people. First of all, choosing the right people to work with, people you trust, people who can understand your vision very well, who you get along with. For me, it's very important to have a lot of chemistry with my crew. It's not only how good they are and how talented and capable they are, but also there should be a lot of chemistry, because this is not only work for me, it's life, it's an experience. So really being able to lead all those people, so understanding like the psychology behind everybody's role, and putting the target always in front of everyone. We're working on this together, and we want to make something that's successful, that you are all proud of. And at the same time, making everybody feel and understand that you are the leader. So things cannot be mellow on set. Like, decisions have to be made very quickly, and you have to be sharp and decisive. So that's many things. It's not like one thing. In addition to your creative choices, like creative choices are like your work as a director, but I'm talking about everything else that's not related to the creative work. So I would say leadership.
Which is a very huge responsibility, actually, and it's probably, you know, one of the toughest character traits that you need to handle.
No.
Okay, so I will add Raymond's website here if you would want to know more about Raymond's books, and also please contact Sophie if you would like to have a link to the movie. And Sophie and Raymond are both on Instagram and Facebook. So again, you may want to add them. Your accounts, both of you are public, right? I believe. So
Yes.
okay. And thank you so much once again for this wonderful conversation. We learned so much. There were so many fun backstories that we were listening to tonight behind your novels, behind your movies. It was fantastic. We got to have a little glimpse of, you know, some behind the scenes moments of what it is like to be a screenwriter, what it is like to be a novelist, what it is like to be a director. And thank you for all that you do. You both do outstanding movies and novels. And again, I will raise Raymond's, these are the two books that I still have. The rest, they're on Kindle. I'm a big Kindle person.
You threw away the others?
No, they're on Kindle. Of course not. I never throw away books. So,
Rona, thank you for hosting us and for inviting me and Sophie onto it. I just wanted to add, just in terms of, there was one question about books to suggest something. There are a couple of things I thought might be useful for some of the people attending this. One is, I really recommend Stephen King's book, which is called On Writing. It's quite obvious, but I think it's a great book in terms of not just from a technical point of view, but also from his anecdotes about his life as a writer and his experiences. The other is there's an online service called Stage 32, which is a screenwriting community. They do fantastic seminars, I mean, all kinds of things. So it's a great, it's kind of like a LinkedIn specifically for film and TV. And I really recommend Stage 32 for anyone who is interested in or who is already in that world. And potentially, which is a cliche and a very boring thing, but Robert McKee's story structure book, whatever online course is as is masterclass, which you have to subscribe to, but masterclass has some amazing courses so in screenwriting. You've got Aaron Sorkin, you've got Shonda Rhimes, you've got Dan Brown, you've got some great, and it's a fantastic resource for people who are interested in it.
it's funny that you mentioned Stephen King, because some of the students who were present here today, a couple of weeks ago, we read Why We Crave Horror Movies by Stephen King, which is a very enjoyable essay. And, you know, it does go extreme in some cases. I mean, it starts from the point that we all enjoy horror movies because we are all mentally insane. So, I mean, the guy has a point, but at the same time, you know, what about those who do not enjoy horror movies? But thank you so much, Raymond. Thank you so much, Sophie. This was wonderful. I'm really sorry we couldn't take all the questions that were flooding in tonight, but I'm sure Sophie and Raymond would be happy for you to contact them with your questions to continue the conversation as well. And again, thank you all for being here. Tomorrow's session, unfortunately, has been canceled because Maria couldn't make it tomorrow. So we will let you know when the session will be postponed for. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening, afternoon, day, depending on where you are.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.